Now I'm going to tell you about the Beatle Paul James. What are you talking about, Mark? Well, it's a little known fact, but in 1962 Paul McCartney came extremely close to changing his name to Paul James. And that would have led to some amusing things like Yesterday, written by Paul James, and the albums James, James 2 and James 3, and the songwriting credit Lennon James, or maybe even James Lennon. He came close, but he rejected it. He never talks about it anymore, but in 1991, in an interview with me, I got Paul talking about pseudonyms, and he told me this.
When it came to the Beatles, I remember being in the back of Brian Epstein's Zodiac, his big posh car, Ford, and talking about whether Paul McCartney was a sort of right name. And he sort of felt it was a bit of a mouthful. And I did too. I sort of thought, well, you know, how's anyone ever going to remember that? People didn't remember it particularly at school, ever. So I was going to become Paul James. That was the next thing. I thought Paul James. That's kind of good. But then, I don't know, we then just sort of thought, nah, you know what? And luckily we said, nah, you know, let them remember our names, which is good now because McCartney is a sort of standout name now, like, as with Lennon, you know. There's no two Lennons. You don't get confused with all McCartney.
The crucial thing about Paul McCartney, John Lennon and George Harrison is that they were their real names. He had the self-belief and the self-trust to go with who they really were. And that was a key thing about the Beatles, in that John, Paul and George, they were authentic in everything they did. They kept their real names. And that was a great influence and inspiration for all the singers and musicians who followed. We can have our real name as well. So very important that he stuck to his true name, the name that we all know and love, McCartney.